Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Trying to go next to it.
The only one that see, they slip in. I've gotten mouse to respond a couple times, but it's not.
Slide over here, we'll see if we can.
There we go. Look at that.
Right between the mayor and Alexander.
It is the appointed hour of 7 o'clock by Verizon clock in my pocket as opposed to the clock on the wall. I'd like to call the work session to order. I'll remind everyone, our purpose tonight is to meet with Echelon and Urban Core. It's an informal meeting of Lexington City Council, Echelon, Urban Core, and the discussion this evening is intended to be among these participants. And while this work session is a public meeting, this is not a community roundtable discussion. I do not anticipate there will be a time for public input tonight, and I know there will be no action. Thank you all for being here, and I invite you to contact one of us or the city manager with your questions and or suggestions related to the presentation and discussion this evening. And with that, I'll invite Jim to tee it up for anything.
I have no presentation other than to introduce our individuals, our guests here. Randy Coffey with Echelon, Andy Beach with Urban Core, and Edwin Gaskin also with Echelon. And I'm not sure who's going to lead off over there with the.
I think we're gonna just kick it back and forth and keep it informal.
Okay.
So we do have a PowerPoint that we're gonna probably fly through pretty quickly. Some folks may have seen it already.
It's just a little introduction of kind of who we are and as a partnership who we are.
Yeah, I think everybody knows we're talking about the VDOT site on Waddell Street. For overview.
So I'm Andy Beach, one of the owners of Urban Core Construction. We started our business in 2010. We are a development company and construction third-party contractor. I grew up in Salem, Virginia, and so I spent some long hours on buses coming over to Rockbridge County High School to play sports growing up, and familiar with Lexington. My dad went to BMI, so familiar with the area, but went to Virginia Tech. Worked for a large company for 8 years before I started my business in 2010. And we have done a lot of infill commercial and residential development around Richmond, and historically Church Hill, which is a historical neighborhood. We've done a lot of things there, as well as Scott's Addition, which is an old industrial neighborhood that was converted to kind of a mixed use neighborhood in that area. So we really take a lot of community input and pride in the projects and the product that we put out to kind of give a note to the history of the locations that we work in, and make sure that we're incorporating what is best for the people that live in those areas to make the places fun, places to live, work, and hang out.
We've got a slide on Echelon. I think our tires have been probably kicked pretty sufficiently through the spot split process, but Echelon is Edwin and I got two principals, and then Andy didn't. I don't know if he mentioned, but Urban Core is just him and one partner, Jeff Bunch, who couldn't be here tonight. Echelon, we're a small, deliberately small team, family type business, and we operate primarily all across Virginia. We tend to find ourselves in these smaller markets doing these infill redevelopment or new construction kind of placemaking type projects. Most of what we've done in our portfolio has been multifamily, and we prefer to hold long-term. That's how we approach every project. And we've been believers in Lexington for a while. I think we first started looking at sites more than 4 years ago here. So we're excited to be here.
Yeah, I have a business partner that owns the business with me. We have 38 employees.
So for the VDOT site, we are talking about what we've proposed is a mixed-use project, primarily multifamily, up to 200 apartments. Talking about the target markets, Andy, feel free to chime in. But in our portfolio, the way that we design these communities, they're really oriented to that. I would say we've got two primary demographics. One is that kind of younger working professional, and the other is the empty nesters or the retirees. And we've got folks in our communities in their late 20s or early 30s, and folks all the way up into their 70s living in these communities. So we design with, I would say, market rate but quality finishes, granite countertops, stainless appliances, quality finishes, and then we have amenity packages in all of these projects that include fitness center, a business center. Some of them have a pool. We don't think that's the right fit here. And we'll probably have a co-working area, kind of a club room hangout area also.
Yeah, with the indoor and outdoor pool about a block away.
That was the feedback that we had gotten from some of the conversations we had, was let's steer people to use the existing community amenities and let's do something different here. You'll see on the site plan that we've tried to incorporate, or we have proposed to incorporate something for the community, an amenity that's not exclusive to our residents. So what we're looking at is 3 to 4 story buildings. Right now we've got it, this is really preliminary, but we've laid out 2 buildings, and what we've heard is that they want to see kind of an activated streetscape with people, being able to walk around and ultimately walk to downtown. You may have folks from the school or from the ball fields coming to frequent these commercial spaces. So we've said in here a minimum of 3,000 square feet will be reserved for commercial use. Our current plan shows 5,000 feet, and we've got up to 200 residential units. We have proposed reserving up to 20% of the units to tenants that are earning up to 80% of the area median income. And I know there was a specific question that was circulated on that we can dive into a bit.
In general, most of the projects that we've done in Richmond with the commercial spaces, we've taken kind of entrepreneurial type people that are either working for a specific restaurant under a chef that want to get out onto their own and start their own restaurant, or we worked with a couple guys who have restaurants but wanted to open markets. And so we like to tie in somebody from the community into those spaces to make it more of a local feel. And it just seems to be more of a draw for the people in the community to come there, as well as it's a draw for the tenants who want to live in places that have that.
Some of this we've already hit on. It's just talking about amenities. What we've seen that people like is active green spaces with grilling areas and fire pits. And on the club room side, you want an indoor-outdoor environment so that people can take advantage of the good weather. And so that's what we have in mind here. That's what we designed for. This runs through the developer obligations. I don't know that we need to read all those. They've all been circulated. They were in the RFP or in the RFQ response, and then the same thing on the city side. They're pretty similar to what was proposed and agreed to on Spotswood. Snapshot of the financials. This is using, the city had assembled kind of a cost benefit analysis spreadsheet, and over a 10-year period, depending on the number of units that get built, this is the the net revenue that would be generated over that 10-year period.
Real estate taxes.
It includes real estate taxes and personal property taxes. It does exclude some of the other items that were part of that spreadsheet because they were a little speculative and hard to quantify. So $4 million for 150 units, a little over $5 million for 200 units. Scroll on down if we can get the mouse to work. This is the latest concept plan, which is a little different than what was submitted with the RFQ response. We have programmed some commercial space, which we have labeled as basically a kind of a neighborhood market. But that's 5,000 feet in there, which is a lot bigger than would be needed for that. So we envision a number of different users in there, and we actually had a meeting today with Stephanie from Red Hen and Rebecca from Lexington Main Street and Tracy Lyons, kicking around some ideas for potential operators and different businesses. But we could cut this up into smaller spaces to provide a number of different users. But I think the key from our perspective was how do we make this, as prominent as possible and give them as much of a presence and make them accessible to the community, because this site's a little bit tucked back, but there is a fair amount of traffic here with the school right there. So we are envisioning kind of an indoor-outdoor area with the market, maybe some outdoor seating, and provided that we could find the operator. What we have in mind, the best example that we could point to is in Richmond. There's actually 3 of them now. Stella's Market, which was opened by the owners and operators of the restaurant Stella's, and they've got some grab and go sandwiches. They sell some groceries, limited selection of kind of beer and wine, and but it's a great community amenity, and that idea was a product of the evaluation panel that was put together. So that's already shown its value. And then on the plan on the left side of the screen, you see a park, and we're not sure exactly how that would be programmed yet, but we have dedicated some sort of programmed green space, active green space that will be open to anybody in the community, not exclusive to the residents here, but open to anybody. So folks walking by, folks that live in the area, people that are using the commercial spaces. That's something that, and I think the specifics of it are TBD. We want some feedback on that, but that's one of the items that we felt like was important. And that's what we had heard from some of our listening session. Mm-hmm. And then that pretty much wraps it up. I know we went through it pretty quickly, but we wanted to kind of get into more of an open discussion.
Scroll back to the plan.
Yeah, we can leave that plan.
Very good. Thanks for the presentation. This is informal. Members of council have questions. It's not like you all to be shy while you're warming up. Looking at this picture, the easement obviously is in place, and I assume our attorney's not here, but the county, Rockford County Public Schools has that easement, and that's untouchable. That is theirs, and
right.
We can't do anything with that. I see you eliminated the small building that is there currently.
And I should say Philip Thompson, of course, was with us
right.
From the school, with Rockford County School Board. So
and we did connect with 2 of the neighbors, Commonwealth Environmental, and then George Hugie. And so we got a little more context since this plan has been done. George needs to make sure that tractor trailers can have access to his catering kitchen there. So there's some things that I think the architect had to kind of design with some assumptions in place, but this would be revised. I mean, it would go through countless, iterations before it be a final product. Right. This is give give everybody a good feel of what we're envisioning. We've got parallel parking along Waddell Street and then along that interior boulevard also.
Frank, is that easement granted in the deed, or are they just giving the easement to the county schools?
Granted in the deed.
It is.
It's on the survey.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think one of the other objectives with doing this modified layout is that we really wanted to show a two-building approach. We think with this site, the market, the number of units, it will be prudent to, probably a building and then the other building. As we've talked about before in one-on-one conversations, we see this as a two-site, three-building project. Spotswood site with one building that's been discussed, and then this site with two buildings. So we're not really sure. I'm sure the minds are going to, well, what does that phasing look like? And what's the timing of that? We have no idea. But we do know that this is considered a small market by the capital sources, and probably the best thing we can do is make the project smaller while proving the premises to move on to the next phase of the larger project.
Did you say parallel parking on Waddell Street? Did I hear that?
Yes, it's technically on this property, but it would be along, fronting on Waddell Street.
Fronting on Waddell.
Correct.
You're talking about those few small spaces there.
Yeah.
right?
Kind of a little bit of a
Yeah.
pull-off parallel.
Make sure I heard.
And when we met with
Yes.
the chamber team this afternoon, much of the brainstorming rallied around the idea of grab and go type services. And it is a tight site. We do think we have a healthy parking ratio the way it's laid out now, but there's not a whole lot of room for a big user that's drawing in customers for a long time. And so we all felt like the on-street, but not really on-street, parallel parking there would lend itself to those commercial spaces having a quick turnover type of customer parking.
I know when you met with the first review panel, they talked about the number of bedrooms, and ultimately it's up to y'all to decide what you want to do as far as that goes. But are you still thinking predominantly 2-bedroom units? or-
Well, go ahead.
I mean, again, we're past spitballing, but we're not far beyond that with this concept plan. If you could see on there, I don't have too much eye strain, it shows about a 950 square foot average, which is pretty healthy average square footage. Certainly lends itself to a large number of 2 beds. And if you throw in some 1 beds, that might generate some larger bedroom units. Again, we haven't worked out any of those details, but we think we're starting with a really nice square footage that will give a more heavier weighting towards the 2-bedroom side.
Yeah, the latest numbers that we've run assumed a pretty even split between 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. And then it was less than 10% 3-bedroom.
Okay.
And you said the parking is adequate with the spots for the commercial space and for 200 units.
Yeah, I mean, so on just a residential site, we usually shoot for in the neighborhood of 1.2 spaces per unit. That's a blended average that's worked really well across our portfolio. On the commercial side, it depends what the users are. Some people have talked about, well, there's been various ideas kicked around. And so the parking requirement is going to be driven by the exact type of use. And so there's going to be a certain number of spaces per 1,000 that would be required. So our belief is that it's sufficient right now because we know we've got, more than what we would park for multifamily, but it would depend on the ultimate use.
For I don't know, maybe 5 years now, 10 years now, there's been a church that meets at that school every Sunday. And just about every other weekend, every Saturday, every week. I mean, there's activities, but because there's 630 kids that attend that school. So
Right.
it's obviously a high traffic area. Do you see that as a hindrance or is it beneficial to the commercial spaces that, trying to be developed there?
I think, anytime there's activity, we see that as a good thing. Now, how we coordinate and cohabitate and live together essentially in the same neighborhood, that's really a function of design and communication. You'll see that we've kind of spaced our entrances back from the fields. We pulled our parking deep into the site. Part of that is because we want an activated street along Waddell with buildings, not parking. but also that reduces the potential inclination of somebody that's going to the school or a field-related activity to drive all the way back into the site park and go over there. So again, we have to design to be good neighbors, and then we have to operate to be good neighbors. Will there be conflicts? For sure. You know, anytime you have an event-driven space, what's the old adage in retail? You don't build for Christmas. And a much modulated version of that with here, whenever you have a large group gathering, you can't build the parking to accommodate everybody comfortably. You'd be overparked on any other scenario. So will there be conflicts? Yes. But I think the fact that there is just a lot of activity, one, lends itself to the overall vibrancy of what's happening. It lends itself to customers, to the businesses that we hopefully we put in. It lends itself to customers of the businesses that are there. So we see it as a good thing, but something surely we manage.
What, can I ask you, alluded to the 20% set aside.
Mhm.
Can you tell us about the mechanics of how that would work? Because I think that now a single person, $40,550 is 80% of AMI. I mean, that's which now our first year teachers make more than that. So this now first year coaches make more than that. But yet they don't make maybe enough to afford $1,500 a month or $1,600 a month. So in a small college town, there's lots and lots of people that need housing, but I think as these units get built at both places potentially, a lot in the community have said, oh, this would be great for young teachers or the coaches that are just kind of cycling in and out and just want a place to live for a year or two to see if they're going to stay. But in a way, almost the 80% of AMI, those folks are maybe in a no man's land now, where they can't afford the full price, but then they also don't qualify for the 20% that are set aside for maybe young professionals starting out. So just kind of how your experience with that. And is there an application process? What if they get a raise in their second year in Lexington and they make 43,000 instead of 40,550? Do they lose their ability to live there? How's that work?
Let's see, I'm gonna answer the affordability question two ways, or you may want to opine on this. For the folks making 80% AMI or less, and the example here was, I think, $40,550. What the requirements that we have in our communities when we're every tenant submits an application, every tenant goes through a background check, and the requirements that we have is that the tenant makes at least 3 times their gross income is at least 3 times their rent, and that's HUD guidelines also. So if somebody is earning $40,550 a year, then their rent would be $1,126. If it's someone earning $46,350, then their rent would be $1,460. Just for some booties in the water. The second way that we've thought about this is we think, we're approaching this as this project filling a certain kind of band in the housing spectrum, and that band is the upper end of kind of the higher end product of what's available in Lexington as far as rentals go. And so with 200 units built here and 62 at Spotswood, that's going to free up a number of other units that are currently occupied by people that may be willing to pay more for a place with more amenities. So there's kind of I guess a ripple effect that's a little hard to quantify, but intuitively that's what we're expecting would happen.
So, but they would lose their lower rent if they make more, if they get a 5% raise at their job or something, or a teacher, and that I'm just trying to,
it's
real
a good
world.
question.
Honestly, if they no longer qualify, they would no longer.
They would, right.
So any program has to have
Just
some fixed parameters.
exactly. So I just trying to wrap my mind around a coach or a first year teacher, second year teacher that might make 45, but their rent is, if they could go to 18,000, And, you know, so that would just not be feasible for a school teacher, I guess.
Okay.
Is the 1,100 for a one bedroom or two bedroom? And then-
One better.
One bedroom.
Again, these are HUD rate guidelines now. Doesn't really take into effect those guidelines when we will be, open for leasing. So I just don't want us to focus on fixed numbers, because those things move. over
Just
time.
wanted the mechanics on how it would work.
So simplistically, you're conforming with government regulations. Whether it's here or anyone else.
Correct. A lot of that's going to be driven by the financing that's ultimately brought to bear on this project. So any loan program, particularly those that, are sponsored by any number of government agencies, have their own income requirements or management protocols. We're very far away from even having a clue as to what is the right Rubik's Cube solution to the financing for this project. But to Mr. Betts and Mr. Sigler questions, I want to provide a very unsatisfying answer. Because when we talk about affordability, it is an increasingly complex problem to solve. We definitely don't have all the answers. We maybe even only have some of the answers. We're dealing with macroeconomic forces that are stunning when you really think about it. I mean, the cost of construction for us have really doubled in the last 5 to 6 years. Interest rates have more than doubled in the last 2. And so whatever's built here by whoever builds it, it's going to be some of the most expensive structures built in Lexington, period. Just by virtue, not because any construction mismanagement, just by virtue of the macroeconomic inputs that we have. So if we're taking that and we're trying to bake this proverbial cake and we've got these ingredients, how then do we address the idea of affordability? We don't have the answers. We do have the desires to do it. And based on some of the programs that we might avail ourselves of, we might get some tools in the toolbox. But there's a lot of wood to chop here, proverbially speaking. And we really need this leadership group and our team to really noodle this through iteratively as we go through this process. There's not going to be answered tonight or in a year, but we'll be stumbling towards some solutions which will probably fail to satisfy everyone, but it will be probably the best that we can come up with together, given macroeconomic environments, available programs, available incentives. Somehow we need to make the numbers work on the most expensive real estate project that's going to be built in Lexington and still make some element of it affordable. That's a challenge, not going to lie.
So you mentioned the challenging macroeconomic environment we're in. What are your thoughts on securing financing on this type of environment for a project such as this?
Well, the most important thing we need right now is time. We couldn't even, we'd spend an hour listing all the projects that we know of that have been canceled or deferred based on what's happening right now. So, but what goes up, hopefully will come down, things will adjust. We are seeing by virtue of urban cores having rolling data points, some construction pricing coming in slightly less than it was on the last project. That's encouraging. We're not smart enough to know all those big macroeconomic directions or changes in the wind, but we believe that time will help. We know that we were asked to start this project today. There's no way we can make the numbers work. Our preliminary financial models are daunting, but they're preliminary. And we believe time is what's needed to slow clap, if you will, this project through some challenging macroeconomic environments.
Well, it's also worth noting that 2.5 years ago, these numbers worked with lower rents.
Correct. Right. So if we'd started spot school 2.5 years ago, we'd be in good spot. We would have dodged a big bullet. But woulda, shoulda, coulda are the cruelest words in the English language, and here we are today. So we have to make this work, and we know that this has basically a much bigger challenge financially than even what Spotswood is. So we're coming to you with eyes wide open and open arms saying the best thing we can do right now is time. If you like this concept and you like us as a team, and not liking either one of those things are perfectly legitimate options, then I think the biggest concession that we need to talk about collaboratively is time for things well beyond our control to improve. And you not wanting to take that time is a legitimate option for you. But for us to pursue this, and we believe any credible developer that would be sitting in these seats would need the same thing, because very few teams are making any projects work in much bigger markets. Lexington has the added drag coefficient of being a smaller market. So capital sources that are already cagey, already hiding under their protective cushion, so to speak, want to focus on more proven primary markets, not a market that hasn't seen new construction apartments in many a year.
So the agreement, I thought at one point it was 18 months after approval, start construction. Are you saying at this point you'd like to extend that?
We think we will need at least that. So if we move forward on those terms, we should build in a safety valve of another 6 to 12 months beyond that, which we're happy to address with reporting requirements, milestones, what have you. But this is going to be a road to hoe, so to speak. And we also need to reframe, frankly, the Spotswood timeline as well, because we see these things as moving in tandem. We don't see them moving apart. We see these as 2 sites, 3 buildings, but 1 project. So we don't have the answers here tonight, but this is a work session. So we're throwing these things out here. So either in this meeting or a future discussion or one-on-one, we can talk about it. But in terms of the macroeconomics, thankfully, we're not responsible for them. Regrettably, nor can we control them. And we believe that any development team, if they were being honest with you, as we always have been, would be telling you the same thing. We still love the site, still love Lexington. We still believe in the premise, but time's what's needed.
Can I ask you guys a question about the slide about the potential revenue generation? Basically, my question when we get to it was, I see those numbers right there, the 375,000 to 500,000 is what can be expected in a year. What are those other 2 numbers? The 4 million.
The 10-year period.
The 10-year period. Okay, thank you.
We're showing an escalation of value. And again, I think Randy made a good point. These are real estate taxes and personal property taxes. We're not, if you can read in the fine print, we're not calculating any attempt at meals tax, sales tax, water sewer fees, other ancillary revenue streams, or frankly, any indirect or induced economic impact. So, so this would be in our opinion, an achievable expectation in terms of economic impact that's direct to the city coffers, but really understates in terms of direct to the city economy.
And what everyone was talking about, costs, construction costs. So probably since in the past 8 years, since 2015, it was even, things were going up, not as drastically in construction pricing before the pandemic, but they were continuing to go up. But for the first time in 8 years, the project that we just priced to go out the door is coming in less than the project that we are just finishing. And so it's not drastic, but we feel like we're going to start to see a slow downward trend in that cost that then makes all the numbers work better. And then, you know, I didn't have the chance to talk about, David, your comment about affordability. One thing is, if you increase the supply of housing in general, you will create more affordability. You know, and especially we hear a lot from the conversations that we've been having, how hard it is to get a place to live. So whether it's our units or not, and how we determine the price, if you increase the supply, it should obviously allow more supply in the market with a lot of demand, still should lower the pricing of affordability across the whole market that you're in.
So getting back to the 20% affordable units, I would assume that, you know, you would have a part of your company or another company that's a property management firm to handle the eligibility of those applicants, and they would be working by way of VHDA to do the tax credit piece for you. Or
So we're proposing not to use any tax credits.
At this point.
Okay,
Yeah, that's one of the challenges is this is a market rate project. And so if we were to try to avail ourselves of the tax credits, then we would need to restrict all the units to 60% of the area median income.
so you're not expecting to recoup the,
Unfortunately not.
okay,
So right now, the current proffer is independent of any financing mechanism or loan program we use. We would do this, and it's not painless.
Well, that was, I'm glad
Right.
Marilyn asked that question, because I wrote that down. You said the guidelines that you're proposing are required by any programs that one might avail themselves to. However, you're not availing yourselves to any
Correct.
programs.
Yeah, we haven't
So
picked that dance
that's-
partner yet,
that's
so there might be more.
Right, so whereas I think the mayor said you made it sound like, anyone would have to abide by these government
There
Guidelines,
are government,
but
there are
they're
government
gonna be-
regulations
echelons
basic
regulations.
regulations.
Yeah,
to probably try and split the hair. If you commit to doing subsidized housing at 80%, it's federal guidelines as to what that is. If you do 10%, it's still the same guidelines. If you do 60%, it's still the same guidelines. So, and I mean, I'm glad to be corrected if I'm wrong, but the programs are the programs from that standpoint. What might be required by a financing partner might be different and require greater number or different metrics for that. If you're doing some Fannie Mae financing or Sallie Mae financing or something of that nature.
So, and because we haven't, and prudently shouldn't at this point engage that entire industry, because the project's not ready for that dance yet. I guess what we're proffering here is your minimum expectation of affordability. This is what we can commit to as owner operators, that 20%.
And that's just that what we propose is a voluntary proffer that is consistent with what BHDA does, for example.
Usually you're tying that to some incentive. We aren't getting any incentive other than just providing for the community more affordable housing.
Now, we may in fact end up in one of those programs that requires this or more, but again, this is a minimum concession to affordability.
If you don't do it, I think it's commendable to you because you'd be taking that loss all the time and getting involved with any of the programs is a bear. Trust me. I was trying to find out today about that $40-some thousand single person and what that rent would look like. But my tax credit person that does that every day hasn't answered me yet. And I was looking at it, what it would look like for Section 8. That person wouldn't even qualify for Section 8. And unfortunately, a lot of people now that are getting wages like $15, $18 an hour, previously they might have been able to qualify for Section 8 before those their income went up. Now that their income has gone up, they don't qualify for Section 8, but then they can't afford to pay the market rate rents in the area now, much less later on. So to being able to do that yourselves in-house, I think it's wonderful. Thank you.
I know that Echelon has retained a lot of projects that you've done with long-term owner. I asked once before if you've ever sold any of your projects off, and I feel like you were in the process or maybe.
We sold 2 last year.
Okay. So are there any projects that you have done with Urban Core? Do you own them together long-term, or, man, is that not for me to even ask? Do you build it or help build it and then it becomes Echelons or,
This is a new partnership.
okay.
We have not built or owned or operated anything.
So you've never worked together before?
We
I
work
wouldn't say
together in
that.
indirect relationships, subcontractor work, some contractor work back and forth. Certainly from a personality perspective, our team helped finance a small project for Urban Cores last year. So the relationship has been building over time.
We shared some of our construction team with each other based on who's got more of a demand. Andy went to tech, so naturally we're friends.
Does Urban Core have a portfolio that you own and operate?
We do.
And if it comes to fruition that you own and operate, and I just want to focus on VDOT, the fact that there could be something, the timeline on Spotswood could be changing, that's a whole other conversation as far as I'm concerned, because where we've already been with that project. But would you see someone full-time managing the the property at VDOT after it's completed or partially completed? Is that?
From our portfolio experience, there's a definite yes to that as an answer. But generally, rule of thumb, when you have about 75 units, that justifies a full-time property manager. Okay, and then usually there's a supplement, maybe not quite FTE maintenance person, but probably pretty close. Cleaning teams, lawn care team. From those ingredients, you build a property management team. Here we're talking about 200 units, so absolutely you'd have at least a full-time property manager, probably an assistant of some kind, full-time maintenance person. So again, we think about it in terms of units of 75. That's when you start to sort of bring on those FTEs. That's my perspective.
Yeah, so we have done a lot of development in the past and have partners on that development. And the way it works and why it works well is because as a developer, your biggest risk is during construction. And that's where all things fall apart between the contractor and the owner. When you're an owner and the contractor is part of the ownership, the partnership and the ownership of the eventual real estate at the end, then everybody's incentives are aligned. And so we felt that, and that's how we built our business, and that's how we've kind of gotten into the deals. Is people came to us and wanted us to do the construction, but they also wanted us to be partners in the real estate. And so that's how our business has evolved, and that's how it came to be that we're in this partnership together. Because once the construction's done, again, there's lease up risk, but that's not generally where your projects fall apart. It's between the owner and the contractor. So that's why I like the model. And in general, we have never sold anything that we've done the development and construction on. We're buy and hold people. We want to own for the long term. And we're very much in the same philosophy as Edwin, that, you want an on-site management. That's why it's easier to have 100 to 100 to 200 units, because then you get the scale that you can have a professional management company, a professional manager on site and that type of thing.
And then that was kind of, the manager I questioned post construction, but during construction was one of the ones that of course you get on every project, and it just give you a chance, because I know the answer better be someone's accessible 24/7 during construction. But can you just explain how that would work as Lexington is whether to, elementary school construction or retirement home construction? The neighbors have been impacted and they want the ability to call or ask questions or however. Can you just talk about how that would be managed?
Yeah, so each one of our jobs has a project manager that will be assigned to it. On site, you have a superintendent and an assistant superintendent generally, and then what is called a project engineer would probably be on site as well. So they're going to be in a trailer on site all the time. All the communities that we've built in Richmond are very active and very different. Churchill was built pre-Civil War, a lot of home ownership in that neighborhood. It is very active with people living there. Scott's Addition is very industrial and resident, but mostly rental resident. So you have a lot of trucks coming in and out. You've got businesses to deal with, people that live there rental, and then, like I said, in Churchill. So we are very adept at understanding, and then we are good neighbors throughout construction for sure. We're gonna, generally talk to all the neighbors prior to starting. We're gonna let them know what's going on. We have certain hours that they're gonna work. Generally, our superintendents are gonna give their cell phone out to anybody that touches the project to make sure that if anything comes up, come to me, and we're gonna help fix and solve those problems before they become major issues.
Have you built next to a school where 600 kids are dropped off and at 8 and picked up at 3, and do you have experience with that kind of challenge to your processes?
Yeah, Chimborazo Elementary is in Churchill. It's right in the center of the neighborhood, and we've done multiple projects right around there. I don't know, how many students?
630, I
Yeah,
believe.
it's probably more like 500 students there, but it's an elementary school that you've got a lot of activity coming and going, and you've got to be very safe. You know, we have a long track record of safe projects is one of the number one things that we focus on.
This isn't an active school example, but when we developed a historic school a few years ago now in Fredericksburg, the old Morey School. It was next to the historic Morey playing fields, which had lacrosse games, concerts, festivals, all the time during construction. So I'll be honest, as the owner slash contractor, pretty nerve wracking, but we got through it. That's what signage and fencing's for, and communication. Again, people generally don't deliberately try to endanger themselves, but we try to prevent those inclinations anyway. Developing next to active environments is sort of par for the course for what we do in urban redevelopment scenarios.
Which two projects have you sold?
We sold the one in the Eastern Shore, Cape Charles, because we were struggling to really find a property management solution there that really worked for us. And then the one in Chatham. Small projects.
Not much room in Cape Charles.
What's that?
Not much room in Cape Charles.
Wonderful little town.
I would have been happy to go there and manage the property.
It's nice, very popular place.
Yes.
I assume y'all and Artie have already discussed our planned development mixed use
We've been trading some emails on it.
project. Seems to fit nicely in there.
That's right. That would be the route we would.
Which is a general statement, not so much a question, but for everybody in the room is in that area, you're gonna have to rezone, and that would most likely be the zoning, and it would still retain the corridor entrance. And you do have to get a certificate of appropriateness. So I know it was an issue on Spotswood, which has no requirements for for building aesthetics in there, though we did put some on you anyway, since we own the property. But planning commission and council will have to, we should have, if this moves forward, have discussions ahead of time, so it's not a surprise as to what we would be looking for a certificate of appropriateness.
That's great. Any guidance, any collaborative course charting
Yeah.
that we can do together, I think makes for a more productive and peaceful process.
Have there ever been any projects that where dirt has been moved, but then you've walked away from the project for any reason? I mean, there's
Not from our side.
questions in the community. Hey, Spotswood and VDOT. We're an outlier. We're a small community. Our project could be one, no matter who's taking it on, that if the economy gets even worse, they walk away from Lexington. Has Urban Corps ever moved dirt and then sit back, stop the project? Is there unfinished project anywhere? Like in Charlottesville, there's some unfinished projects that people will look at.
I think the answer is no across the
Okay,
board.
thank you.
But
And all the projects we've done, we've done hundreds. One we didn't finish, and if you Google the guy's name, Michael Hill out of Richmond, he was indicted for embezzlement, and he was not a partner. We were just working for him, and he's facing like 115 years in jail. And so he stopped paying us, so we couldn't finish. That's the one.
Got it. Thank you for being honest and sharing. Just
I think it's a great question. And in terms of this process and the overall process, I'm sure you all understand, but maybe for the public's benefit, as we go through what we call entitlements, site control, which is this, being selected, purchase contract, and then entitlement, zoning, certificates of appropriateness, and so forth. Then the next hill to climb is, of course, financing. And that's where, after we've all convinced ourselves that this project's going to work, we have to go convince a whole lot of other people to bring capital to it. And that's really the bearing point here. And we try as best as we can to make sure that nothing in the site control process or the entitlement process effectively undermines our chances at that next climb, because that's probably the biggest pass-fail mark there is. If we can't convince the world that Lexington is worth investing in, and this site in Lexington is worth investing in, and this team building the site in Lexington is worth investing in, then we've spent a lot of time and good intentions to no avail. So once the financing is done and we start moving dirt, our rush is to finish, because as Andy correctly pointed out, that's the big risk bucket, is during construction. But there's a fair amount of convincing to do, data-driven convincing, to get from site control, entitlement, and then to financing. So that's really what we're focused on, and I think we can do it collaboratively, but occasionally we're going to bring up things like, I'm not sure what's that going to do to our financing. And certainly when we talked about facade treatments with Spotswood, we had a great collaborative discussions. That was part of that filter. Like, are we doing something that creates undue cost burdens while not achieving a higher aesthetic? So there's a balance to every one of these decision junctions that's become.
Have you ever been in a financial planning situation where the bankers have said, we'll do X, Y, Z if you would increase the number of units or reduce the number of units, and you had to go back to the drawing board to reconfigure?
The short answer is yes, but probably not in the way you're imagining. It's not as collaborative. Most lenders have sort of their preferred profile of their borrower project, and either you're going to fit in it or you're not. And so we have been rejected regarding projects because it didn't fit that bank's particular profile, which changes. A lot of profiles are changing right now, given macroeconomic environments. But generally, the hope is for more units, because if they're buying into the premise that this will be a successful business venture, they want to see more of it, because that makes not only the structures and site more efficient in terms of services to the tenants, but also the property management. There's also, I guess, more rental data points to distribute out unexpected costs over time, if you will. So in short, more units better than fewer units. And we have a lot of experience doing small projects, and I have to say that more units is easier than fewer units, because you're doing largely the same amount of very time-intensive effort for a smaller portfolio. That makes sense.
Randy, if you can go back to the
plan.
please, and while you're pulling that up, looking at architecture or the style, if you're familiar with Cornerstone Bank downtown, it blends in and was based upon what used to be there 100+ years ago. And if you come in on Route 11, there's the DuPont Credit Union, which doesn't look like it's been here very long. And just a personal preference, in looking at the construction here and the facades, would hope that there would be something that's more in character with the community, what's been here a long time. Taking a swipe at my friends across the street at the Farmers Co-op, they've been here a long time. It doesn't need to look like that per se, but I hope that will be more reflective in the design that you all come forward with.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Weren't finished yet, Mayor, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think this goes back to Strong's comment about certificate of appropriateness and us charting a course together.
Right.
We came up with a fairly good working committee process with Spotswood. We would like to receive that guidance sort of in advance, so we can not be so mocked in the paper with our first couple of design versions, and really make a better effort from the outset and be more attuned to the sensitivities of those that have to drive by it every day. So we welcome that input in an organized, constructive way, and would like to see that prior to releasing the architects. So yes,
Fair enough.
let's do it.
And historically, the things that we've done, like what we do in Scott's Addition is a very industrial area. It has nodes to those types of that area. So if you look on our website for the Scott's collections, there's 3 of them. They've got metal panels on the exterior. It's black metal railings. And then if you look at things that we've done, like at Churchill, it's much more traditional architecture that blends in with what we've done up there.
Those are all on the website. In looking, all this, I anticipated surface parking that you proposed. Did you look at doing a parking deck or
That's
elevating and
Not
parking?
not even
later on?
remotely economically viable.
Okay.
We know the cost per space when it comes to structured parking, and it's horrendous.
Okay. And even parking under the building is still cost prohibitive.
Yeah, the tuck-in parking would be, that would be cost prohibitive for sure.
And from the standpoint of Route 11, there on the east part of the property, any concerns or the lay of the land there? How do you plan to tie in with that?
We think that the topography gives us some separation, and in fact, probably my concern about Route 11, when we talk about the commercial space along Waddell, is that we are tucked pretty far off the beaten path, coming around on Waddell, and even then down some topography. So we don't have any concerns about Route 11. It's a major thoroughfare. There's city traffic folks, there's county traffic folks, there's people coming in and out of the school area and the pool and the fields. Generally, we all think that's a good thing. We do have some concerns about the type of retail that we promote for our space, because it's not on a corner. It's not on an intersection that lends itself to retail. So we do think it's going to be more neighborhood oriented and sort of modulated for that wavelength, so to speak.
Gotcha. It's probably early in the process, of course. I know you talked to John McCoy and George Ugie. Have you talked to any other neighbors? I've been somewhat pounding on the table for a couple of years on a South Main Street Renaissance. The Lexington Restaurant building recently went up for sale, and I think it's under contract, may or may not have closed. We've got a habitat development with the transition of property there across from the co-op on Main Street. But have you looked at any other parts around, or even the property sort of catty corner beside Kenny's on the open grassy knoll there?
In terms of acquisition or communication?
Combination.
I don't think in terms of acquisition, we've set our sights on any other properties. Frankly, as we've experienced in all of our other projects, we hope that once we're underway, that will catalyze, motivate other owners to renovate or sell and renovate or upgrade their properties. That's typically what we see in our experiences. In terms of communication, I think thus far we've only reached out to those 2 parties, but certainly open to making new friends.
We had lunch at Kenny's.
Yeah, we ate.
Did you get a burger and chicken?
Burger, tried to be, I tried to be.
In kind of
It's not possible.
a best case scenario, when would you anticipate this project would be completable? Best case scenario.
Well, probably what we outlined on the earlier slide.
Okay.
18 months, what we proposed, 18 months of due diligence. I'm going to misquote ourselves unless it's up, but it's in the
Because
proposal.
I think you did say you may need a little more time.
I think I'm almost certain. we will. So if we're selected and we go to a purchase contract, we need to build in a safety valve. Just because none of us know. It is a strange time because things aren't trending the way they have historically. Everybody's waiting for some other shoes to drop, which could be healthy, but they haven't happened yet. There's a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines. Frankly, there's a lot of projects that are sitting on the sidelines waiting for interest rates to improve. So we don't know when that comes down, everybody's going to jump back in the swimming pool, and then we're back to the same scenario of a strange inflationary cycle. So the world is going about fixing itself, but we don't know the timeline.
Absolutely.
Can you briefly talk about the need or not the need for a traffic study in this area? Obviously, that's something that is the go-to line about Spotswood. And I think kind of what I learned was it is far below far below anyone that would ever do a traffic study. The first 60 units where people, I mean, where the traffic is going different directions and so on like that. But for this one, 200 units to me near a school, I mean, it starts to be significantly more than Spotswood.
Let's see, I'm trying to remember the rezoning requirements for the new ordinance. Do they specifically, is there like a blanket requirement for traffic study? Or do they defer? I know VDOT has a threshold. I don't recall what it is, but.
Yeah, I don't recall either. Can we research that and get back?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
What we're gonna do is cite the VDOT threshold, and that's somewhere on the internet. But that, we don't want to do the study if we don't have to, and generally we'll have VDOT dictate whether or not we have to, if it's not articulated in your zone.
Okay.
It's, we've seen traffic studies used in the past, as potential solve to calm folks down, tends not to do that, because a traffic study is a bunch of data points where anybody who doesn't like the project anyway can point to a data point and try to discredit it. So I think traffic studies would properly used to help us all build safer and better infrastructure, but they're not a convincing argument. They're not they should be persuasive or dissuasive. They should attune us to an updated census to the health of the infrastructure. And we would be motivated for that infrastructure to be healthy as well. We don't want to overwhelm the intersections. We don't want to create some sort of traffic nightmare that doesn't lend to renting nice apartments. So I'm sorry if that's not a satisfying.
Well,
answer,
no,
but
I
we
mean,
need to do
it's
more
just,
research on
it's just something that if we were to move forward, if we were to move forward, if we are a partner, the phrase traffic study, those words are going to be repeated until with the better one's done. I mean, it's just 200 units is a lot. One might say that a middle school there, where there used to be a middle school there, and and half the county kids went to that school and half went to a different middle school, and then they all combined into one. So that middle school a few years ago was 300 to 400 kids. Now it's 630. That was what, 8 years ago or so, and I'm sure maybe 10. Gosh, but that had an impact on the community. Of course, the traffic study was not done for that. So I was just thinking 200 units.
So it can be an effective planning tool if you're talking about a sort of revitalization context here that we're just a part of. Maybe a great idea for the city to bring in a traffic engineer to help brainstorm through some of the ramifications of what some of those moving parts may be, including this project, but not limited to it. If we brought in a traffic engineer to study our project, that's what they're studying, that exact scenario. And if it changes, then it becomes less valid. But there are traffic engineers that offer more comprehensive planning analysis, not a true traffic study, but to help show you the dials, if you will. So if things are happening here and there, you can start to make more informed decisions.
Well, as Route 11 comes into the city, as it comes, I guess, northbound, it's one lane. But as it leaves the city, I guess it becomes 2 lanes, because one becomes a turn lane, so heading south. Just as I think about that, what's best for Lexington, what's best for that infrastructure.
Definitely busy intersection.
Busy by Lexington State.
Yeah, well,
Having lived in Houston and all this lived in big cities, we are far from traffic.
And if we do our jobs right, we will be busy, because we'll have people coming and going and doing wonderful things and enjoying their life there. But we need to make sure that the infrastructure is up to the task, and we are aligned in that objective.
and talking about amenities, where you have the parallel parking, would the sidewalks be on the business side?
We haven't gone to that level of planning, but like between that inset parking and the
Portions. Okay. And then the center there, that's just kind of premium parking. You come in and get the first spot, so you don't have to walk as far, relatively speaking, to the front door.
You're talking about in that kind of boulevard and entrance. I mean, we've kicked around ideas for reserving some of those exclusively for the commercial users, but
That's just
Could
regular
be a
parking.
premium permit, it could be a variety of things with that. Certainly, some of it
Currently
will
just
be
regular parking.
ADA, you know, vehicle access, so.
More design and 10th Avenue Boulevard, and then it generally, if you just have a flow of traffic, two ways, and slows people down and parking on the side, it just gives it a different feel when you're coming.
That experience that in Lexington, the tight streets, it slows people down. Lose a lot of mirrors, but better than.
Good for the
fenders.
economy as well.
Exactly. What other questions does council have?
Well, as others come up, please don't be shy, as I know you're not. We're happy to do additional discussions, one-on-one or as a group. We're pretty available via email or phone calls. This is a great site and a great community. It's not an easy site. It's going to be a process to work through the year's worth of work to make it start and then to get it. There's a lot of problems we cannot solve by ourselves. We're going to have to work, we want to work with you all, and that's frankly a sort of a requirement of us moving forward that we have that.
Thank you all for being here. There's one last call for questions for council members. As I mentioned at the outset, if members of the community have questions, contact city manager or any of us. I'm sure Urban Corps and Echelon are available as well. Just to sort of a closing piece, just to affirm, the ownership of this project would be joint.
Right, that is our stated goal at this point. We have not put any entities or anything like that. That's what we would do when we get to a purchase contract.
Good to know that the neighbors, owning neighbors will be. With no other questions, thank you again for your time. I look forward to the next steps. We'll detail those in the coming weeks and work to stay on schedule and keep the lines of communication open to come up with the best project for commercial enterprise and capitalism, as well as for our community and all of our citizens in Lexington. With that, we'll stay adjourned at 8:07. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Police department for hosting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hurry on.